Hello, and thank you for joining us here on the Neutral Zone. I am Phil Milani, joined as always by my esteemed colleague, my partner in crime. Really, the best way to describe this person is my everything. It's at Aric DiLalla.
Phil, great to be with you. Big day. Big day.
Big day.
Big hire.
Show.
Big hire.
Home runs. Everything.
Yeah, out of the world.
You name it, we're jacked up.
Mega.
It's mega.
Yeah.
This is a big. The Broncos found their guy, Aric.
They got their guy.
They got their guy.
Who is it?
Sean Payton.
Nice.
Yeah. 15 years of NFL head coaching experience.
Yep.
2009 Super Bowl champion.
Woo.
2006 AP Coach of the Year.
Oh, yeah.
He's leading your Denver Broncos. Yeah. We're going to talk all about him today.
Yeah.
We're going to break it down. We're going to break it down.
It's official, Phil.
We're going to break it down. Yeah.
There's kind of a gap there between reports and official. It's official now.
Now it's official. Yeah.
Which is why, of course, Phil, Ben Swanson is not here.
I was going to say, it's just you and me. It's just the two of us in the studio today.
When we got big time news,
we had to get serious.
We got to get serious.
Yeah.
Get rid of some of the riffraff.
Exactly.
And also, Ben Swanson was included in the trade compensation that the Broncos sent to the New Orleans Saints.
Exactly. They said, we need Swanson.
Yep.
Otherwise, we can't do it.
That was part of the hang-up, I think, is the Broncos did not want to give Ben Swanson up.
Took a long time.
But ultimately, I mean.
Swapping picks and all that, that was fine.
Yeah.
But the Swanson, they were like, we cannot do it. Yeah. I also heard that when Swanson was trying to decide what to wear for a big occasion, he was like, I can't pick. Too many flannels. He was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
you think the flannel works in New Orleans or no?
I don't know.
It's tough.
Yeah, because it's kind of humid down there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's sort of flannel weather.
Maybe in the winter time?
Hot.
Winter time?
Yeah, maybe.
You think he does a nice stop by the Senior Bowl? Of course, I'm typically there.
In Mobile?
I'm just feeling a little bit sad that I'm not in Mobile, Alabama.
Yeah. How do you know how some of the punters are doing down there?
Yeah, that's tough to know.
If you're
long
not
snappers.
There. The long snappers.
Idea.
The snap of the ball. Of course, the Broncos, they probably have a strong contingent down there.
Yes, I imagine.
I would imagine. So, just got to find out some of the top talent coming from the college
I'll just have to
ranks.
work a little bit harder at the combine.
Yeah, of course. Which, of course, that's going to be hard for you to do.
Yeah, that's true. Because I already worked so hard.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So
how do you work harder than 200%?
Yeah. When there is no room to get better, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? So a lot to get to, though, when talking about Sean Payton. What does it mean for Russell Wilson? And, what's the short-term goals here now that they've got a guy like Sean Payton coming in? And then what's a long-term vision here for this Broncos team? What beyond the next couple of years here? What are you expecting to get out of Sean Payton and this Broncos team? So those are some of the things I think that maybe we can touch on a little bit here today.
That would be really nice.
Yeah. So should be a nice little show.
Yeah.
If people say they've got a thought about Sean Payton,
oh, they do.
They're like, hey, I've got a hot take and I got to get it off my chest. How do they do that? There's
so many ways, Phil. I mean, there really, truly are. One is that you could send an email to neutralzoneshow@gmail.com. Ben Swanson, I think, is going to still forward them from New Orleans, so we should still get them.
Yeah.
You could leave a voicemail, Phil, 707-NEUTRAL.
That's a nice way to do it.
I believe we have a voicemail coming up at the end of the show.
Yeah.
A really nice
one. A good one.
Yeah.
It was a nice one.
Or, Phil, you could tweet at us directly on Twitter, at Aric DiLalla with an A, at Phil Milani with a PH.
Those are non-traditional spellings.
Yeah. At Sean Payton with an S.
Traditional spelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tweet tell them how you feel.
Tweet at him.
Or at Broncos Podcasts.
You think we'll get Sean on here?
I would think he'd want to join the nation.
Yeah. I mean, of course, he does a lot of stuff with Colin Cowherd.
Yeah.
I think he's ready to step up.
I think it's time to go to the big leagues.
Yeah. That's what I think.
We'll see. Or, Phil, you could mosey on over to the old YouTube.
Yeah.
The Broncos official YouTube page.
That way you could check out, hey, how's the hair looking?
Oh, yeah.
You, of course, have a nice Broncos QZ on today.
Yeah, I'm feeling festive.
I think that even Peyton Manning would be jealous of that.
A lot of Paytons these days. A lot of Paytons around.
Yeah. You think this town can handle it?
Peyton Manning, Sean Payton, George Payton.
Some of the best Paytons.
Anybody else
live in this?
Robbie Payton.
Yeah, Robbie Payton.
I don't know who else.
That's a lot of Paytons.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of Paytons.
I think it's big enough. Denver's a pretty big town.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go over to the YouTube page.
Yeah, leave a comment.
Leave a comment.
We read them.
We read all
religiously.
Of them. Yeah, Doug McLaren. Okay, last week.
Okay.
Tons of wasted content to start the show. The real show starts about 19 minutes in. So that was kind of mean. Then Mike Williams, 0728, responds and says,
Chargers receiver?
Thank you. I don't know. The back injury?
Yeah. Staley? Is your back okay?
Yeah. He said, thank you, prayer emoji.
He spelled out prayer emoji?
Yeah. Strange. Avathon. Phil is a top lad. I love him.
That's a nice compliment.
Thank you very much.
Maybe from one of our Broncos Europe listeners.
Yeah, a lad. Jeremy. That's it, just Jeremy.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know how he must have been one of the first adapters of YouTube.
How did you?
Adopters? Yeah, not adapter. Adopter.
There you go.
Cool show. I always watch.
Nice.
And then also says, very good point, Eric. Like I think he's just like
watching live and
then commenting in the comments.
Well, the good thing about that comment is it's kind of applicable to the whole show.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, like good point, Eric. Yeah, that could be a bunch of them.
Yeah, that is true. Metambale.
Nice.
Ben, turn up your mic, dude. You have important stuff to say.
No, he doesn't.
Maybe the Saints podcast, they'll take that note.
Yep.
They'll take that note. Elijah Kane says, offer Peyton Manning the head coaching job. I think we moved on past that.
Past that.
I think we moved on. And I think that might have been all of the... Oh, Rocky Marquise. I don't like coffee. Yuck. Because, of course, we were talking about...
sitting on the dock of the bay?
Jerry Rosberg dock.
Yeah.
Deck? A deck dock.
It was a dock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think a deck is attached to the house, right?
Yeah.
A dock.
But can you have a dock attached to your deck? I think so. One of those nice ones where the house is right. Yeah, where the house is right up against the water.
Maybe.
The deck is like there, and then from the deck it turns into a dock.
Directly into the dock.
Yeah. Huh. I believe they refer to that as a deck dock.
Oh yeah. I've heard that.
Yeah, you've heard of that?
Yeah.
You ever been on one of those?
No, I've only heard about that kind of
down to a deck
legend.
Dock? Yeah. Those are nice. Yeah. I've been on one once.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, one time.
What was it like?
It's everything you think of.
Yeah, I bet it would be.
Yeah. So
you have to kind of see it to believe it.
Yeah. Oh, so you don't even believe it?
No, I don't think so. I think kind of like the Easter Bunny or something. Yeah.
You've never seen the Easter Bunny?
Kind of like a glimpse once.
Oh, really? Yeah. Moving too fast.
Just the tail.
Yeah.
I was like,
you heard a ruffle and you went to go look.
Russell?
A rustle, yeah.
Yeah. Russell was there.
Yeah. Wow.
Easter Bunny, let's ride.
Let's ride. Yeah.
Let's hop.
We gotta talk about Russ a little bit here too. So, okay, let's get into our first topic here. The Broncos, of course, make it official. The 20th head coach in franchise history, Sean Payton. Eric, what was just your initial reaction? Yeah,
I was excited that the coaching search was complete. That they found a really good head coach. I think there was some panic. I think amongst maybe not panic, but maybe angst among the fan base. Maybe even some reporters. Just hey, what are the Broncos going to do here? And they end up with a really proven head coach. The draft compensation, at first you look at it and you say, okay, a first-round pick, a second-round pick for a third-round pick. You say, oh, that's kind of a lot. And then you think about it as, okay, it's kind of like you trade Bradley Chubb for Sean Payton. And when I think about it that way in my head, I would do that trade 100 times out of 100. And that's no disrespect to Bradley Chubb, but I think the Broncos have shown the last few years the importance of having a head coach that is an advantage. And the Broncos, I think, have not had that here in a while. And so, one first-round pick. Listen, you need good players, but to get a guy like Sean Payton, I think instantly transforms you back into a playoff contender. And obviously you want to see it on the field, but Phil, my view was that there were a couple of candidates, Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton, that could make a quick turnaround, that could do this in 1 year. And the Broncos went out and got one of those guys. And so from that standpoint, I think you're really excited about what this year could hold.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just right off the bat, you're excited just because you expect the culture around here to change dramatically. I mean, you saw what it could be like with Jerry Rosburg taking control just for the final 2 games. Now you're talking about a guy like Sean Payton who's won a Super Bowl in this league and having the entire offseason with the team, getting ready. He's going to hit the ground running. I mean, things are going to change dramatically if you ask me. And Aric, when I think about this Broncos team and I think back to, the Super Bowl or even 2016, from that point on to right now, to me, there's been like a couple of themes with the that's come along with the losing. One has been inconsistency at the quarterback position, and the Broncos went out last year and found Russell Wilson, made the trade for him there, where now you're like, okay, at least that position, we know what's going on there. And then with this move, they've addressed the other inconsistency, and that's the head coaching position. Because to me, ever since Vance Joseph came in with Vic Fangio and then Nathaniel Hackett, there's been a lot of questioning, hey, what are the Broncos doing with this? Why are the Broncos doing training camp this way? Why are they doing this like this? What about this time management issue? What about this play call? What about this? There's been just a lot from the media and probably the fan base too that's been questioning decisions made by the head coach. Now, if you're like, why did you do that? He's like, because that's how I do it. Because that's what wins. Those questions are gone, if you ask me. It's like you've got a proven guy here who's done it, and he knows what winning is like. I mean, 9 of the 15 seasons there in New Orleans, they had 10-plus wins. I mean, that's legit. You know what I mean? That is winning week in and week out. And we talked about it before, when you have a guy like Peyton Manning, you just show up and you expect to win. I mean, it's not quite to that same level, but it's kind of like that where you're like, we're going to never be out-coached. We're going to come in ready to go. That's a mentality of the team, And I just think that when you have a guy like Sean Payton, the whole expectations and mentality, everything just shifts.
Yeah. I mean, you've heard Bill Belichick talk before about how Sean Payton's one of the top offensive minds ever because he gets on the field, they identify quickly how to attack your weaknesses, and then they go. And as a defense, it's hard to stop. And you're right, as an experienced head coach, you don't have to worry about any of these, these learning curves, these speed bumps that we've seen happen around here again and again over the last few years. And I think you also know, Phil, and we'll get into Russ a little bit, but if something isn't working here, I think you're going to know it's not Sean Payton.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Sean Payton has shown, hey, I can win, and I can win in different stretches. We remember the coach of the year in New Orleans getting to the NFC title game. You remember the Super Bowl. And then there was a stretch where I think the Saints went 7-9, 4 consecutive years. Sean was the coach for 3 of those years. And then they rebounded, and I think won 11 consecutive games, at least 4 more years in a row. I mean, he showed that kind of with 2 completely different teams, the quarterback was the same, but otherwise 2 completely different rosters, that he's able to build a winner. And so in Denver, if something's not working in terms of, players or, just being able to stack wins or compete against the Chiefs, you now know, hey, we've got the head coach taken care of. You don't have to worry about this guy. You know that he's the right answer. And listen, that doesn't mean he's immune to criticism. I'm sure there'll be times where a play call here or a game management decision here is questioned. But I think by and large, like you said, Sean Payton is going to deliver at the highest level. And so now you can begin to evaluate around him, okay, well, what are the other pieces we need to fix? And I think previously here, part of the problem, Phil, has been you don't know what the problem is. Just, is it the coach? Is it who's at quarterback? And I'm not speaking just about last year. I'm speaking about the last 7 years. Is it the coach? Is it the quarterback? Is it
exactly
the defense? Is it, player evaluation? All these things. You couldn't quite, in my mind, identify what the issue was. And now I think, like you mentioned, you're slowly removing areas where that could be the issue, and that's going to help you in the long term. And Phil, I am a huge fan of Gary Kubiak. I am a big fan, one of my favorite people.
You love him. Just say it.
I love that guy. But I would also say that Gary Kubiak's probably not a Hall of Fame coach. So I think you're looking at a guy in Sean Payton who is the best coach who's been with the Broncos since Mike Shanahan walked out the door.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the most accomplished.
Yeah, and so to have, I mean, you think about what's worked here.
Yeah.
You think about Mike Shanahan. You think about Gary Kubiak coming in and having that magical 2015 season. Sean Payton is in that discussion.
Yeah.
And so to have a guy like that means a great deal.
And look, like his, you look over the course of his coaching career in the NFL. I mean, he starts out in Philadelphia. He's under Ray Rhodes and John Gruden there. Then he goes to the Giants. He's the offensive coordinator there with Jim Fossil. That team has a lot of success. He goes to Dallas. He learns under Bill Parcells. Like, he's coached with a lot of accomplished coaches in this league, and just that wealth of experience, he's bringing that all here to Denver now. And I'm sure that taking the year off last year, he was able to view the game from a different lens, and maybe he gained some knowledge even from that too, just like seeing how the rest of the league, he's able to watch a lot more this way, I think. And he should come in re-energized and ready to rock here. I mean, a lot of these guys can get burnt out just because of the hours that it takes and the grind. I mean, by all accounts, Sean Payton is a grinder. I mean, he's going to come in here and get to work. He puts in the hours. I mean, that's sort of his reputation here. After 15 years, you can understand maybe, hey, there's some burnout there, where you're like, I gotta step away for a second here. But you miss that itch, I would assume. And I bet he'll talk about that when he's introduced and we hear from him for the first time. I bet you that he's going to say, look, I wanted that itch, but I needed to scratch that. And now he's going to come in motivated and ready to go. Yeah.
And, I think that there are things you talk about him being in this league and working with all these different people. You don't have to worry about when, the Broncos last year, we're in week 6 or week 7, and Russ puts a wristband on, and people are like, why hasn't he worn a wristband? And the answer was like, oh, well, we were looking around and trying to figure out things to do to help. Sean Payton's not going to need to look around for 6 weeks of the regular season and figure it out. He's going to know going in. And I would say, Phil, with Russ, one of the things that surprised me a little bit was that I expected when Sean Payton was announced as head coach that the reaction from national media members would be a little bit subdued, and that people would say, oh, well, Russell has to be better for this to work. Overwhelmingly, the response has been, this is great news for Russell Wilson. This is a home run hire. The Broncos are huge winners in this trade because they view Sean Payton as the person that can make Russell Wilson and get him back to Russell Wilson. Even some people that have been very critical of the Broncos and Russell Wilson at times have said Sean Payton's going to put together things. And Phil, we saw earlier in the year, he said, I'm going to look at 20 plays of what he does best in the red zone, 20 plays that he does best on third down. I'm going to make sure those things are built into my offense. And so from that standpoint, that leads me to believe that he can have a really quick impact here. And like I said before, there were only a couple of coaches that I thought could do that immediately, but because he can build an offense quickly that's going to highlight the strengths of Russell Wilson and then install that culture that you're talking about, I think you could be looking at a pretty quick turnaround here.
Yeah, I think so too, because when you talk about like what happened last year, it kept feeling like there was a lot of change. Like, this isn't working, we're going to change. This isn't work. The clock management, we're bringing in Rosberg. This didn't work. We're going to change this. We're going to change play callers. We're bringing in the wristband. We're doing this. Everything always felt like this didn't work, so we got to change. And there was like a lot of moving pieces all the time, it felt like last year. Whereas I feel like with Sean Payton, there's going to be a little bit more consistency. And I think that's necessary to win in this league. You just got to be able to know what you're doing. And you talk about Gary Kubiak. I mean, everybody looks to the Super Bowl season, but in 2016, I mean, you lose a Hall of Famer generational talent like Peyton Manning, and you insert Trevor Siemian into that spot. That team was still competitive.
Yeah, they went 9-7.
Yeah.
Almost made the playoffs.
And to me, obviously, that defense was tremendous.
Yep.
But having that leader, Gary Kubiak, there's just sort of a steady hand there where the mentality didn't change, even though Peyton Manning wasn't there. Now, they didn't go on and win a Super Bowl. They didn't make the playoffs, but they were right there. And that was still a pretty good team, and the discipline and the identity was still there. And so I think that you look at this Broncos roster and you're like, okay, there's definitely some areas that need to get addressed this offseason, and maybe that's a multiple year sort of situation just to get to the talent level up to where it needs to be. But immediately the mindset's going to change, and the discipline is going to be there, and the mentality. When I think about those Saints teams, man, they played hard. It looked like they were having a lot of fun. Like those post-game locker rooms, were crazy. Sean Payton's dancing with those guys. And when you talk about the players who played for Gary Kubiak, they're like, I would do anything for that man. You would even do anything.
Of course I would.
I mean, you would run through some brick walls for him.
Multiple
brick walls. How many? 4 or 5?
6.
6 brick walls.
Yeah.
So I think that you have to have that. And that's one thing that, we keep picking on Hackett here, but I don't mean to do that. But it's just that this is what happened last year.
Yeah, this is our most recent evidence.
The most recent thing. I do think that guys liked playing for Hackett, but maybe that discipline or that balance wasn't necessarily there. I think Sean Payton's going to be able to strike that perfectly. He's going to be able to press all the right buttons. He's going to be able to motivate these guys. They're going to know the expectations. They're going to know the standard. And it's just going to be completely different. So used to first-time head coaches coming in here and having those growing pains and learning and stuff. It's just not only is he an experienced coach, but he's done it at the highest level for a long time. And I think that Sean Payton was the number one coaching candidate out there.
Yeah.
He was the guy. A lot of reports said the Broncos were very interested in Harbaugh, which makes sense. But I think that just in terms of the candidates that were floating around.
He's the only one that's won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, he was the guy.
Yeah.
So,
Phil, there's 2 things there that you said that stood out to me. One about him getting his guys here. I do think, I'll be interested to see when there's finally a press conference here, who has final roster control between Sean Payton and George Payton? Is that a collaborative thing? Obviously, there's going to be times where there's disagreements, and someone's going to have to make the final call of, do we make this trade? Do we keep this guy on the roster? Those sorts of things. But I would expect, and I'll be interested to see, how much of an impact Sean Payton has, just in terms of, you think of New Orleans, and I think these big-bodied receivers, incredible talents on the outside. And then I also think of in the backfield, of course, an Alvin Kamara, a versatile guy that can do a lot of different things. And it's easy to say, of course, go get an Alvin Kamara, go get a Michael Thomas, Marcus Colston,
But they identified those guys.
But they found them. They drafted. I believe Alvin Kamara was a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah,
right?
these aren't top 5, top 10 picks.
Right, and so they're finding these guys that are then top of the line, all pro talent. I think in 2019, I believe, the Saints had 11 Pro Bowlers. That should give you an idea of the type of talent that Sean Payton brought to that roster. So I'll be really interested to see how quickly they can get some of that offensive talent. Those, Phil, we talked all last year. The Broncos need a game breaker, somebody that if you're an opposing defense, you're afraid of these guys, and you're saying, how do we stop this guy? And there's a lot of teams around the league. The Raiders have Devontae Adams. The Chiefs have Travis Kelce. You look around the league, and a lot of teams have these guys. I don't know that the Broncos had that for all of this year. Jerry Jeudy, I think, got closer toward the end of the year. But so I'll be interested to see, 1, how quickly can you get those guys in there? 2, what sort of resources are still devoted to the defense? Because the Saints had some really quality players on defense, but the results were not always there. And so that's where, if you can get a Jiro Evero to stay and be your defensive coordinator, if that's the direction they want to go, that would be really, really important. So that stands out to me. And then also you mentioned, hey, he comes in here, demands respect, demands accountability. I also think, the players are going to buy in because he's had success, but it's the same thing with Russell Wilson, right? You've got to do it again here. Mm-hmm. Because if you come in and you start 0-3 or 0-4, or things don't go so well, you're going to have to earn that trust back the same way that I think Russ probably a little bit has to earn back the I don't want to say the respect, but just kind of that reputation of being a top guy. So that's just, we're really excited here. I think this is a great news for the organization. You still got to go out and work every day and prove it every day. I think Sean Payton's going to help them do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've all learned a lesson from Russell Wilson last offseason where the hype train took off.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of people this week have been pointing out to...
we were in the back. We were putting the coal in the engine.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people this week pointed to Russ wearing those cleats saying, hey, the fourth Lombardi's come in. There was just a lot. Russ didn't shy away from saying, I'm here to win Super Bowls. I want to win multiple Super Bowls. Like, that train was cooking. And I think that we all learned from that, just like, hey, we need to see it. We need to just sort of take it day by day here. All the cliche stuff, hey, let's just take it easy, see what happens here, and see how everything comes together. But I do think that there's a significant reason to be excited.
Yeah. And listen, in terms of the Super Bowl talk and all that, I'll be interested to see, does Sean Payton mention winning world championships? I would think so, because that's still the goal.
The standard. I think you mentioned the standard, but say, look, it's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah.
I think you got to balance it.
But I do think, just in terms of the Russ, this organization had been down for so long that I think
excitement was.
I think people, they wanted anything to buy into, and so it kind of makes sense that it took off a little bit. And listen, it's still okay to be excited. It's okay to be fired up when training camp gets here. It's okay to be excited about how Javonte Williams or how Jerry Jeudy is going to look in this offense. How Russell Wilson, can he rebound? But again, hey, let's take it 1 week at a time. Week 1, whoever that ends up being, let's focus on that instead of hoisting a Lombardi in February of 2024.
Yeah.
But Phil, we talk about the short term in terms of, what's realistic this year. In my mind, I do still think that a winning record, competing for a playoff berth should be
the standard,
the expectation this year. And then you get in the playoffs and you see, hey, can we make a little bit of a run here? When you look longer term, we talked about, hey, when Russ came here, for this to be a successful trade, I think we both agreed that you probably need to win a world championship.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, get to a Super Bowl.
I think that's what you want with Sean. Here, let's talk about Russ in just a second, and then the long term in just a second. I did want to make one point just about what you were saying with roster decision. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
A little bit? I would imagine that in most organizations, they're at the end of when something hits the
rubber meets the road.
Yeah, or like there's something hits the bill or something. And the buck hits
the buck stops. Where the buck stops.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that. There's one guy there.
Listener, just kind of imagine what you think it might be.
You know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. When something meets the road, what did you say?
Rubber meets the road.
Yeah. Maybe that.
Yeah.
That too. I do think that I would have a hard time imagining that's not Sean Payton. Just with the resources that they've devoted to getting him, I do imagine that would be Sean. And I do think that they'll let George do the GMing. He'll do all the some nice GMing there. But then if there is a time where there needs to be a discussion between those two, I think it's going to be Sean. I mean, we'll have to find out for sure, and I'm just speculating here, but I would imagine it's Sean.
And it's, I do think you can argue that he's earned that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's built a winner. Obviously, the structure for people who are not aware in New Orleans, Mickey Loomis is a GM, but Sean Payton was the guy that was making those decisions and built those teams. And so, listen, it's important to have a great partnership, and I'm sure George Payton will still be an integral part of it. But if it is Sean Payton who's making that final decision, he's got the track record to show, hey, he deserves that.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, the players need to fit what Sean wants to do.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so you got to be like, hey, I need a big-bodied wide receiver to do this for me to be able to win. So we need that. And so you just do that. You know what I mean? So,
and I would say one more thing on the evaluation. It's possible to be a really, really good coach and not be so good at the drafting.
Yeah, that's right.
Bill Belichick, for example, he's just the greatest head coach in NFL history.
Yes.
Most accomplished. He has not been a great drafter at times, especially at like the wide receiver position. They've really struggled there.
Yep.
And so if you can, a guy like Sean Payton, you're never going to be 100%, but a guy who's been able to identify talent, not in the first round, that's really elite talent, and also coach, man, that's a complete package there.
It's in terms of football mind.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like that.
But I would say the job of GM, there's a lot that goes into that day-to-day where you're doing. It's impossible to do both at an extremely high level in terms of the day-to-day.
Yes.
You can't, it's just too much. So I do think that there's a lot for George. And George has proven to be an excellent talent evaluator. You're not going to hit 100% of the time.
Nope.
But he's proven himself to be a talented talent evaluator.
Very talented.
A lot of talent.
Evaluator. I'm sure Sean Payton loves walking in here to an all-pro cornerback in Pat Surtain.
Yeah.
Or a really good young running back in Javonte Williams.
Yeah.
Or think of what Jerry Jeudy's going to be able to do in this offense.
Oh, my goodness. Do you think he'll be like a Colson?
Smokes.
I
don't know. We're still kind of early in this process.
Yeah.
I'm going to be interested to go back and do some more thorough evaluation of what things looked like early because – the first half of Peyton's career in New Orleans, they threw the ball more than anybody in the entire league.
Yeah.
And they were just hurling it all over the place. And then later, they kind of took a more balanced approach and ran the football a lot more. Obviously, having a guy like Kamara that you can target out of the backfield changes that. But, even with, I think that last season in New Orleans, where I think they missed the playoffs, but you're using Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill. They still finished 19th in the league in scoring. Yeah. Which is not incredible, but
how
the Broncos would, I think, sign up for that in a second.
Yeah.
So, I'm interested to see how they're going to use these guys. And Phil, I do think that the great thing about Sean Payton is that he's not going to come in here and say, this is the way I've always done it. We're going to fit the players to this scheme. He has such a great offensive mind that he's going to be able to find the best possible way to, and it might be, I've heard he has kind of like this offshoot of the West Coast system, but he's going to be able to do things that work for Russ.
Yeah, let's get into that with him and Russ a little bit here. Obviously, Russell Wilson spoke very highly of Sean Payton after that Chargers game, said that he's a world-class coach, that he's done it at the top of the top, that he's gotten the most out of these guys. And we've also heard that Russell Wilson likes to watch a lot of tape of Drew Brees. Those two have become close friends during their times at Pro Bowls and all that kind of stuff. What do you think about this relationship, how it's going to be moving forward? Because I imagine that during the interview process here with Sean Payton, the topic of Russell Wilson must have come up a lot.
Yeah, of course. He's your guy right now, certainly for 2023. And everyone's kind of talking about, hey, how do you get out of this moving forward, or what are the options? The Broncos want Russell Wilson to be here long term. Let's be clear about that. This is not like let's just get through this year and then figure it out. Broncos want him to be here. They still view him as the long-term solution at quarterback. He's had one down year, but otherwise has played at a really high level. I don't know that he's going to be back at a top 2 or 3 guy, but certainly top 10 I think is highly attainable. So yeah, I'm sure Russ's the way you work Russ in is important on the field, just in terms of how do you get the most out of him? How do you use his legs? How do you make sure that we're running passing patterns that work for Russ? How do you get him outside of the pocket? All those things to make him more efficient on the field. How do we make this happen more quickly? Listen, the Seattle changed offensive coordinators, and we never saw the sort of growing pains that we did here last year. And so that gives me some hope that this can translate quickly on the field. So that all stands out to me on the field. And then, of course, there's the natural off-the-field stuff, Hey, the office, the special privileges that Russ may or may not have. Those things to me are interesting. How does Sean Payton set those boundaries? Phil, again, we don't want to kind of take shots here or be negative, but I think even if, people are like, the Broncos need a coach that's going to come in here and just lay down the law to Russ and tell him how it is. That's one way to do it. You also can view Russ as a partner and say, hey, we're going to hold each other to a mutual, a required level of respect and boundaries and those sorts of things. I think part of the issue last year was that the coaching staff came in and was like, oh my gosh, we got Russell Wilson. And it wasn't even a partnership. It was more of like let's just let's do whatever this guy wants to do. And so even if you increase that to, hey, there's a mutual respect between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson understands that Sean Payton's going to push him hard to be better. That, in my mind, is enough. You don't have to come in here and scream and yell and be like, you don't get to do anything or you don't get to be involved with any parts of the game plan. That, to me, is a step too far. Let's just establish some good mutual respect where you're going to understand this is a partnership. You're going to get pushed to be better, which is what Russ wants. But I think part of the issue last year was just even that was never established. And so, Phil, there's guys across the league, this office has become a big thing. Philip Rivers had an office in Indianapolis. Peyton Manning here, it's my understanding that, it wasn't an office per se, but he'd watch film in the quarterback room, and there are times where he'd want to just do that by himself.
Yeah. I think that the issue that a lot of people make with the office is that Russ became a little secluded from the rest of the team and that, he wasn't able to really connect with the guys. That's sort of like the national sort of perspective on that is that, hey, Russ was just a little aloof and never really connected. But I think you saw at the end of the year when guys like Jerry and the whole wide receiving room really stepped up and went onto social media. I don't think that necessarily was the case.
And I can tell you, just being in the locker room every day, that especially toward the end of the year, the midway point, Russ spent more and more time in the locker room. He started showing up. Not that he didn't initially, but was showing up to more and more community events for guys.
Yeah, other teammates' events.
Yeah, and so that to me shows that there's already an understanding there. If you need to be a little bit more involved in what the team is doing and can't always listen, there are going to be times when Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or I just mentioned Philip Rivers, you're going to retreat and do extra work on your own.
That's what I'm saying. The quarterback has to put in more time with film study.
Right.
I mean, it's the most cognitive position on the field.
And so if it's an office, if it's alone in the quarterback room when everyone else has gone home, I don't really care. I think I saw with my eyes a concerted effort from Russ later in the year to be more involved. And so I'm not as worried about that. But again, I do think Sean Payton will come in here and set a standard for the entire team of what needs to happen, what expectations are for people.
And I think that you saw that in New Orleans when those guys, that seemed like a close-knit team. Just the way that they celebrated together. Obviously, winning helps with that. You know what I mean? But building that culture, that's a big part of it. And doing that with Russ, that's a big part of it. So I do think that him coming in, setting those standards, working with Russ, those guys, they know each other. I mean, for Russ to come out and speak that highly about Sean, we heard reports that he reached out to Sean Payton during this process. Those things, I think there's a mutual respect there. Sean, I don't think would jump at this job the way he did if he didn't think there was a possibility to win with Russ. So I think that the relationship part of that, I imagine that'll be pretty solid from day one here. So
yeah, and I mean, Russ in year one worked with 3 different play callers.
Yeah.
Again, things just change so much. Sean Payton's going to come here and there's going to be instant, I would imagine instant, expression of here's what the standard is, here's how we're going to do things, we're going to build this offense. But I would imagine Sean Payton is going to call plays the way he's always done. And so Russell Wilson's not going to have to worry if there's a stretch of a few weeks where things don't go well for this team. Hey, are they going to change play callers? What's going on here?
Exactly.
No, this is how we do things because it works.
Yeah. Just that stability, I think, is just so huge.
Of course.
I mean, I think it's a big deal. And, in terms of what it looks like on the field, there might be some people who say, Drew Brees and Russell Wilson, maybe they have similar statures, but their games are totally different. I don't know how this is going to work. I think that the important thing to remember is that they did that with Drew because that's what gave them the best chance to win with Drew.
Yeah.
That's why they did that.
Yep.
And so that doesn't mean that this is what you just swap Drew, put in Russ, and that's what it is. They're going to do what gives them the best chance to win with Russ. And I'm assuming that one of the early priorities for Sean is going to be, let me watch everything on Russ.
Yep.
Let me figure out what's going on here, and then we'll design this thing. And from people that I talk to, Eric, it seems that what makes Sean such a talented offensive mind is that he could just scheme the heck out of a game plan.
Yeah, of course.
And he does a lot of different things that look very similar, but the design is like the design looks similar, but the play is much different. And it changes from week to week is what I hear, is that this is the game plan that's going to be best against the Chiefs. Then it could look completely different because you're facing the Chargers. Then it looks completely different because you're facing the Raiders. Like, it's going to change from week to week, and that makes it really hard to defend.
Yeah, and listen, the Shanahan type system, this is what we said the same things going into last year. I think the difference is that you've got a resume here where it's not just we're not just speculating of what could this look like. Is he going to have success? No, we've seen Sean Payton have success for a long time, for more than a decade. I think 14 of the 15 years, they're in the top 10 in offense. It was only that last year where they dipped below, and even that year, like I said, 19th in scoring. And so there's been sustained success here that I think is really encouraging. You don't have to project. Again, you know what you're going to get. Well, I'm not saying the Broncos are going to go 13-4 and win the division, and I'm not going to make those projections this year. But what I will say is I'll be really surprised if the offense is not significantly better, significantly faster. And so I don't think it's going to be like we're in week 13 and we're like, oh, great, the Broncos have a chance to score 24 for the second week in a row. No, I think early in the year, and that doesn't mean week 1 necessarily, though I think it certainly could, you're going to have a chance to be much better offensively. And just from an overarching standpoint, I think the Broncos have at worst the second best coach in the division now.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to compare him to Staley, Josh McDaniels, and Andy Reid.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Andy Reid obviously is probably, other than Belichick, he might be the top coach in the league, right?
Yeah, but I think people view Sean Payton in that category.
Yeah.
Like, if you're talking about the best coaches in the league, not from a motivational, but just from a mind, an offensive mind. Yeah, you think about Andy Reid. You think about Sean Payton. I mean, those are the guys.
I think that the other thing, like you talk about what we were talking about with Hackett coming in last year, it's like I think some of the question marks around Hackett were, okay, he did this with Rodgers, but he wasn't calling the plays. Yep. And so there was like there was just like some doubt there. Or you're like, okay, well, the biggest success that he's had was like with Blake Bortles, like in Jacksonville. Yep. Those doubts are gone.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, like you're talking about the guy who did it.
Yeah.
Now, I think the one thing you could say about Sean is like, okay, well, he did it with Drew Brees. I mean, one of the best quarterbacks of all time. But I would say that Drew wasn't that before him.
Of course.
And I would also
he was a good player.
He was good, but he wasn't Drew Brees like the Drew Brees.
And there were a lot of questions about Drew Brees.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that, like Sean Payton was one of the biggest factors in Tony Romo becoming Tony Romo. Do you know what I mean? So, like, he found him. Obviously, the Eastern Illinois connection there. But, like, found him, developed him, and then made it so he got into the lineup. You know what I mean? So,
and Tony's not a Hall of Famer, but a really good quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that Peyton Manning, Tony Romo 2013 game. They were going back and forth. Yeah. He was going back and forth with Peyton at the peak of his powers. You like that?
Peak of his powers.
Peak of his powers.
Oh.
That's pretty good.
That's really nice.
So, and I also think that he's going to come in here and be like, how many times last year were we like, gosh, Jerry Jeudy needs more targets? Like
you say that every week.
I mean, both you and I agreed that like he needs at least like 20 targets.
Yeah.
We were both saying that. But I do think that you're going to see him come in here and be like, I've got a guy like Jerry Jeudy. I'm going to make it so that he's one of the best wide receivers in the league.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be, this is what Sean Payton does. He's going to be able to take a weapon like Greg Dulcich and be like, I'm going to utilize Dulcich.
Got it.
He's going to take him and make him one of the best tight ends in the league. I have no doubt about that. I mean, think about how they use Jimmy Graham in New Orleans. There's no reason why Greg Dulcich can't become somebody like that. So I just think that he is the kind of a mind that says, I've got a player here, and I'm going to make it that he wins games for us. Like, I think about that Alvin Kamara game. Didn't he score like 6 touchdowns in a game?
He's a good player.
How many targets do you think he got to have 6 touchdowns?
40.
Yeah. So I'm just like, I think about things like that, and I'm like, underutilized talent maybe in Denver here that they'll be able to be like, we're going to game plan this so that Jerry Jeudy is going to have a monster game.
Yeah. You know, we think about Sean Payton, you think about skill players a lot. He's also built an offensive line there. You know,
that's got to be a huge priority.
That's got to be a huge priority here. He knew how to identify Ryan Ramczyk in 2017, a really good player now at right tackle. He took Garrett Bowles, and Garrett Bowles has turned out to be a good player.
Yes, of course.
But you know, Ryan Ramczyk's probably a really good player.
He hit faster than Garrett.
Yes, correct.
I think that's safe.
Yeah, that's safe to say. So I think that's a big part of it too, is building that offensive line. So I will say one more thing about Russ is I have confidence that Russ is going to play better this year under Sean. And again, I don't know if that means he's a top 3 quarterback in the league. I don't know if he's going to get back to a Pro Bowl next year. I don't know. But what I will say is that you're also going to have some clarity here where that if things go poorly again this year, you're now going to know that
this isn't Sean Payton.
This is not Sean Payton.
Yeah.
And so you're going to know, hey, is this a Russ issue or not? And the Broncos have firmly stated that they believe that Russ is, quote, fixable in their words. But we're gonna know one way or another.
Yeah.
And that to me is also valuable in terms of, you know, if you bring in D'Amico Ryans and he brings in an offensive coordinator with him, who knows if it works? I think in the same way, if it had been Jim Harbaugh and he brought in an OC, you know, who knows? You're going to know.
Yes.
You're going to know. And in terms of the long-term future, that's really helpful to know. And I personally do think it's going to work with Russ and that you're going to see him be here for several more years and you're going to be competing for playoff berths and hopefully a Super Bowl at some point. But you're going to know.
Let me ask you this, Aric. When you watch the games like last weekend and you see the quarterback play that it takes to get to where the Broncos want to get to, could you envision Russ still playing at that level?
I can.
Yeah, so can I. I think that we saw some of that at the end of last year. You know, those last couple of weeks where he was using his legs, he was running around, he was making plays, he was able to throw the ball down the field. There's still that zip on his long ball. I mean, like. He can still play at that level. He did it at times last year. And I think that one of the things that Sean Payton's going to have to do is we need this all the time. And so I think that that's going to be the task is how do we get this out of Russ all the time, starting week 1, more and more out of this, keep him healthy. You mentioned the offensive line. I mean, there was a lot of times last year where Russ was really banged up. He missed a couple of games there. But aside from that, I think he was playing with a lot last year too. Keep him healthy, but also do what Russ does well. That's getting out of the pocket. That's creating the second play within the play. You know, that's dancing around a little bit back there. That's what I see last week. You know, last weekend you see these guys going back and forth, creating plays. You know, I can see Russ still doing that.
Yeah, and I would say 2 things. One, the more you're in the playoffs, the better chance you have to win a Super Bowl, right? Because
of course.
To some degree, there's just an element of randomness with the playoffs. Hey, who has their best stuff that day? How do the matchups work? Are you like the Eagles where you get a nice path to the Super Bowl? Home field, but also you're playing Christian McCaffrey at quarterback, or you're playing the Giants who you're just better than. So that's part of it. Is one, can you get there enough that you've got more chances? Unless you're Brady, you're not going to just win every time. Mahomes only has 1 right now, and I hope it stays.
But he's always in the playoffs. He's always in the championship game.
That's true.
I was trying to make a point to your point that you just got to be in the mix. You got to be in the mix
to win it.
So he's been in the mix a lot.
But he's only won 1 of those.
Yeah.
Hopefully it stays that way. Knock on wood.
Knock on wood, please.
Whereas
this is an Eagles podcast
Brady's always in the mix, and he also always wins.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's kind of the difference.
There's a difference.
The second thing I would say about the playoffs are that games tend to get a little bit low scoring.
Yeah, you don't have
to put up 40 points. You need your quarterback to just make a big play in a big moment. And when I watched that, I could see Russ doing that.
Yep.
And so, I fully believe that in those big moments, and that doesn't mean he's going to throw for 45 touchdowns and be the MVP, but in those moments, he's more than good enough to still get it done.
I mean, we saw glimpses of some of that magic.
Yeah.
I call that magic.
Yeah.
And I think he can still do that.
I do too.
So I think that notion of like, it's not the same Russ. The Seattle Russ was a different guy. I think that he's still there. You just need that consistent coaching and that relationship with an offensive mind like Sean Payton. So I do expect this offense to take a step.
Yeah, me too.
So let's get to our final point here, Aric, and that's just the long-term goals here with Sean Payton, because I do think that there's this mindset that, like, okay, you got to fix Russ, right? And that's what this head coach needs to do. But I also think that bringing in a guy like Sean Payton, like, he's going to be the guy long-term here now. And so what's this long-term vision look like to you? What are some of the goals that you think need to be put in place for this to be a successful hire?
Yeah, you got to beat the Chiefs. I think it starts there. That's more short-term maybe, but you got to make that a rivalry again. And listen, it's never going to be easy because you've got one of the better quarterbacks of all time in your division. And we've seen, the Dolphins, the Jets, the Bills, they did whatever they could for a long time, and it didn't matter when Brady was in New England. And you saw the Texans and the Titans and the Jaguars do whatever they wanted for a long time, and it didn't matter when Peyton was in Indianapolis. The same way when John, was here. And so there's part of that of, hey, even if you're really good, you can't expect to win the division every single year here. I would be really surprised if you go on a stretch where you win 5 division titles in a row just because of how good the Chiefs are with Mahomes. Chargers obviously getting better.
Some back and forth would just be nice.
Yeah, some back and forth. So that's part of it. Hey, can you win a division title and get some home field games in the playoffs? Because if you're going to win a Super Bowl, Phil, it's going to be hard to go on the road 3 times and win. So that means you got to win the division at some point to give yourself a good chance.
Even then, like, you look at what the Bengals had to go through. I mean, they played the Ravens at home. That was tough. Then they had to go to Buffalo and then to Kansas City. I mean, they won the division, and it was still brutal. Like, that path is just tough.
But if you win the AFC West, you're probably going to be a higher seed just because the record it's going to require is going to be high, I would think.
But some people knock the Broncos' job just because you think about the division, and you're like, okay, you got to deal with Mahomes twice, you got to deal with Herbert twice. But I think that Sean is the kind of guy who's going to embrace that challenge. That's what you're here to do.
And
play the best.
The first 2 years of Brady's career in Tampa, when they won the Super Bowl in 2020, the Saints were 4-0 against them.
Yeah.
The Buccaneers did not beat the Saints.
Yes.
They were crushing everybody else and couldn't beat New Orleans. And so he knows how to slow these guys down.
Yeah.
So division's up there. I think that's got to be a step. Obviously.
You think they'll have the Win the West T-shirts or no?
I don't know. I don't know about the T-shirts.
I don't think so.
We'll see.
It doesn't strike me as maybe a Win the West visor.
Oh, that could be nice. Phil, I would say the other thing is that, at some point, I think your hope is that you get to a Super Bowl, you win a Super Bowl. That would make Sean Payton the first coach to ever win a Super Bowl with 2 different teams. So you'd be making history.
The Broncos did it with Manning.
Of course.
They could do it with the coach.
Do it with coach.
Yeah.
And then long term, I just see 2 paths. One, and I think the more desirable path, obviously, is for Russ to work out.
Yep.
And then you've got a Hall of Fame quarterback playing at, like, imagine what would happen if this year Sean Payton does get Russ back to a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you're like, hey, we're in great shape because we got a Hall of Fame quarterback under contract for the next 5 years.
Yep.
And you or whatever it is. And then you can say, hey, we're all set to compete here for the next half decade. We've got a window here. It's back. Or the other path is, hey, Sean can find somebody else and you trust him, whether it's a young guy that you draft, whether it's another trade, whether it's a free agent or whatever, you trust him to find another option and proceed down that route. You're right. If it doesn't end up working with Russ, Sean's going to have a chance and probably multiple chances to get it right.
Yeah.
And so the long-term path for this organization kind of varies depending on what happens at the quarterback position. But imagine if it does work with Russ, because then you are just set up for success. Yep. You've got your coach, you've got your quarterback. Let's go to work.
Yeah. I mean, that was sort of like the Breeze when Breeze was headed to Miami. You know what I mean? With Nick Saban was there, and they said no. Like, Miami said no to Drew, and then he ended up going to New Orleans, and obviously all the success there. So, like, even like when Sean first started to work with Drew, there were these same questions about him at that point. So, imagine if it works, it could be a bright deal. And I also think that the other option there, that's why it was important to get somebody like Sean Payton in here, where now you're going to know definitely 100% with Russ. Yep. So at the end of this year, you're going to know one way or another the direction this franchise is going to take. Whereas if you didn't have someone like Sean, those questions about Russ could continue.
Yep.
What if the Broncos go like 8-9, Russ had a fine season? That's kind of like the worst spot to be in, right? Where you were did fine, Russ played okay, and you just go into the next year being in that middle level.
Yeah. You
don't want to be there. So I think with a guy like Sean Payton, you're not going to live in that middle for long, if ever.
Yeah,
you're going to know the direction of the franchise, and I think that is a good way to look at two paths here, because I do think either way, Sean is going to be a long-term thing here, as long as he wants to coach, I imagine.
Right.
So I think that there's a lot of reason to be excited. And you're just going to have a guy who's a certainty here leading the way for the Broncos, and having that coach changes a lot. It is the rising tide that lifts all boats.
Nicely done.
Did I say that right?
I think so.
I think so.
Sean Payton is 59, so he could be here 59. A decade if it all goes well.
And you just hope that fire is still there. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I don't think he'd jump back in like this unless it was.
Right.
Sometimes a year away, it changes a lot here. So
an apple a year makes...
No. An apple a day keeps the doctor away.
What does an apple a year do?
That doesn't do anything.
Doesn't do anything.
That's not very good for you. Another thing about Sean is the staff that he brings in here, Eric. I imagine that a guy who's been in the league a long time is going to be able to bring in a top-notch staff. Whereas if you're talking about first-timers, that sort of has been the big question mark is okay, what's the staff going to look like? And certainly with Vance and with Vic, there was a lot of holdovers from Gary Kubiak's staff that stayed around. And Nathaniel Hackett brought in a lot of his own guys, but those were inexperienced people.
Yep.
And so you would imagine that a guy like Sean Payton, he knows so many people in this league. A lot of his coaches have gone on to be head coaches in this league. So I do think that he's going to be able to bring in a top-notch staff.
Yeah, and all in all, I always like having an offensive-minded head coach because you don't lose your play caller.
You don't change.
If you lose a defensive play caller, okay.
You can survive that.
You can survive
a lot
that.
Easier.
Harder to survive losing an offensive play caller.
That's something that Peyton Manning has said a lot.
Yeah, so
I agree.
Smart to agree with Peyton Manning.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so I think there's a reason to be excited.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that you don't want to get your hopes up too much, but I do think that, how do you view it? The difference between getting a guy like Russ in at the quarterback versus getting a guy like Sean in at the head coaching position? It feels like, okay, you have to have the quarterback, and that can make the whole offense good. But the whole feel of the team changes now with Sean here. Just the way that practices are scheduled and, all of this stuff is different.
I think you ultimately need both to be successful. If you had Sean Payton here, but you didn't have a quarterback, I think we'd have questions about what are you going to do there?
Yeah.
So the fact that you already have Russ is helpful. I do wonder how you would feel if this had happened in the reverse order.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit better. I don't know. But I think you need both to win at a sustained, for a sustained period of time. I think there are coaches that win without a quarterback for a while, and there are quarterbacks that win without a great coach for a while. But I think ultimately to be at the top of the league, you need both of those things. So, we'll have to see how it works out. It is interesting to think about, Phil. If you had told Broncos fans 1 year ago today, or even today, hey, in 1 year you're going to have Sean Payton and you're going to have Russell Wilson, I think people would have they would have signed up for that, I think.
Yeah.
And obviously you don't quite know what you're going to get out of Russ, but I think his track record still suggests that you're going to get a pretty good player under Sean Payton.
One final note here, just something to talk about before we get to our voicemail. What do you think this says about Broncos ownership? The way that they've gone out, the way that they've handled things since taking the reins here in Denver. I mean, they've made the commitment to Russ, and then now they've gone out and they've got a big-time coach in Sean Payton.
Yeah, I mean, they're just not going to sit back. I think there's a lot of ownership groups that they want the team for the fun of it, and they're not going to do anything outside of that. this ownership group has spent a good deal of money to get Russell Wilson, to get Sean Payton. Outside of that, Phil, to bring in good turf for the stadium, or grass for the final game, just to make sure that it was safe and it looked nice for a final game, and that didn't really exist outside of that. To show a commitment to improving Empower Field a Mile High, to doing a uniform-related study because the fans said, "Hey, we want to look at new uniforms." I mean, that to me says you've got your finger on the pulse of what's important, and you're not just saying you're going to do things; you are doing things, and so. Again, you don't want an ownership group that meddles in football and says, hey, this is who you should pick. This is who should start at quarterback this week. Let's trade this guy or let's not trade this guy. I don't get the sense that stuff has happened, but you want a group that's involved, that's invested, that knows what's going on and is willing to swing big, and they did that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing is clear. These guys want to win.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard that Greg Penner, he said this last year, this is a lot more fun when you're winning. And they've gone out and said, we're going to do whatever it takes to win, and so I think that from a fan's perspective, you're like, okay, I want the game day experience to be really great, and I want to win. Yep. And that's all you want, and they've shown that, hey, we're going to do that. Yeah,
and it's easy to come in and say that. They've done it so far.
Yeah.
And it's a continued effort. You got to keep doing it, but they've shown so far that they're going to do that. So, Broncos fans, I think, should be highly encouraged by that.
Yeah. I mean, I just would be happy. I mean, I think that you just got to be, these guys they're going to do whatever it takes. Yep. So that's exciting. All right, Eric, let's get to our voicemail here. This is from Zach with a C, our good friend. Last week, I think it was, so he said, hey, we haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on, man? And he delivered.
Good afternoon. It's Zach with a C. I'm sorry I haven't been calling in. I've been in a big argument with my taxi guy saying that the telephone needed to be, comped as a work expense because, contributing member to the basically a pre-R, baby R on Twitter and, my phone needed to be a work expense. Big argument. Been trying to fight with Elon about giving me a blue check. Hasn't worked yet, but I am on it. Big arguments going on. Anyhow, wow. But maybe we don't have a coach this week. So let's talk about the Swanson contract details. The guy's been trying out for supervisor for like 3 years now. We either got to sign him to a continued tryout for 2 or 3 years, or we got to give him some direction on how he gets to be the permanent podcast supervisor. Sometimes it's tough. He comes to work every day. He doesn't know if he's going to get the job. Doesn't know if he's not going to get the job. If he gets to press a button, I'm sure it's still weighing on his conscience. There not being audio on a podcast form is a bit of a problem. But we forgive you, Swanson. Don't do it again. Don't do it again. Kidding. But let's talk about the Swanson contract negotiations. Anyhow, guys, I love the jibber jabber. Honestly, I hope we don't have a coach like the rest of the season because the banter and the palaver of the first 15 minutes of the podcast has been hilarious. Anyhow, guys, roll country.
All right, Zach, thank you very much for that. A lot to unpack there. Yeah, first of all, the kid, obviously.
The baby in the background really
sounds like my house right now.
Really made the voicemail.
We need to get him that blue check. Yep. Got to work on that.
Elon, let's do it.
And also the phone. I mean, come on.
It's a work expense.
It is.
It's a write-off.
We need that content.
It's a write-off.
So, it's a write-off. But they should just take care of it.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't even need to write it off. Just have it taken care of. And then Swanson.
Maybe do both.
Yeah.
Smart.
Ooh, double up.
Yeah.
And then the Swanson, of course, he did not know that he's been traded. For this.
Sorry, Zach. We got a coach, so we got to talk about it. And Swanson.
I don't know. Do you think New Orleans heard about the No Audio podcast?
I think
Probably
that they tried
not.
to keep that quiet.
Yeah.
Kind of like the podcast. It was quiet that day.
It was quiet that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe they didn't do all their homework on Swanson, They knew about the flannels. They knew that was going to be.
Did they even watch film before they traded for him?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure. Zach, thank you very much. We enjoy the banter, too.
Do you think Swanson will use the same hand signals in New Orleans that he used
you
here?
got to change it up.
Change it up.
You got to change it up. Yeah, because
people will know.
they'll know. They'll know. Eric, any shout-outs to get to here?
Wow.
Shout out Sean Payton, of course.
Shout out Sean Payton, new Broncos head coach. Exciting times.
Maybe he'll come on this show.
Maybe.
We'll have to see. We're trying.
We're working hard.
Yeah, we're working hard.
Shout out Eastern Illinois.
Yeah, a lot of Broncos.
Mike
connection.
Shanahan, Sean Payton.
Yeah. Some of the best
play there.
talent comes out of it.
Yeah, Tony Romo, Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
Shout out Liz Gerald's
Of course. The community's
community.
constantly communing.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's what you want.
Yeah. Shout out Zoe.
Zoe?
He closed the deal, I heard.
Oh, that's what I heard. He can't. They send him in.
Yeah.
He's the closer.
Yeah. That's kind of how it works around here.
Yeah. What kind of a outfit do you have to wear to close? Like I feel like a tight suit with dark sunglasses. You need that's what I envision.
Yeah, I think so. Perfect hair.
Yeah, like something like John Wick would wear.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm sort of thinking.
That'd be nice.
That's what I envision. So.
And then Phil, shout out Greg Penner playing as we record this, a Pebble Beach Pro-Am.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Of course, you've played with him before, right?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
I only really come in just for this podcast.
He goes to your club or you go to his club?
I haven't gotten the invite yet.
Oh, so he has to come to your club all the time.
Not as nice.
Yeah. And then what's that like? Is there pressure on the number one box there? You just got to hammer one out there? Or what do you do?
No, I just try to not make it too big.
Clear thoughts.
Have some unwavering belief that the drive is going to go straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hardest drive in golf is from the driving range to the number one box.
Ooh. Makes you think.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're mentally weak.
That's true. Of course, that's not something you have to deal with,
Yeah. I like to walk 18.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You feel at one with nature. You're kind of like, this is how it was meant to be.
Yeah.
Use some like cherry wood clubs.
Yep. Just pure wood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Technology is not for you.
No.
Eric, I would also like to shout out Nikola Jokic. He had a tough weekend last week.
You should be shouting out Joel Embiid.
He had a tough weekend last weekend, but he followed up nicely with the game against New Orleans.
New Orleans?
Yeah, New Orleans. He's now averaging a triple-double for the season.
They take on the Warriors this evening.
Yes. That's a nice game, huh? The Warriors, of course, just lost to Minnesota in overtime.
Of course they did.
So,
yeah. Shout out LeBron, who's about to pass Kareem for the most points all time.
Yeah.
Where's Jokic on that list?
He's not just a scorer. He does a lot of different things, I don't think Jokic will ever get into that.
No, probably not.
Yeah. His game would have to change a lot. Yeah. Why would you change if you're already the best?
That's true.
Makes you think.
It would be fun to see
like
Philadelphia play Denver in the finals.
That would be a tremendous
spicy.
series. That would be a really good series, I think. The East has a lot of talent.
Yep.
The East has a lot of talent, but
the Bobcats?
We stick with Nikola Jokic.
Got it.
That's what, at least I do.
Yeah. I went to a nice Avs game last weekend.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Shout out Ball Arena?
They beat the St. Louis Blues. Yeah, Binnington got booed a lot. That was nice.
Avs fans do not like him.
No. I did some nice booing.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Good.
There's no cheering in the press box, but there's booing
when
I'm in the Avs game.
Yeah. The Avs playing well.
Yeah.
We're flying around again.
Heck yeah.
You see, it's all about timing.
That's true. You got to get hot at the right time.
Yeah, and of course, it's the All-Star break this weekend.
Ooh, tough. Don't want to let the hot cool.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Ice. It's on ice for the weekend. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. Who knows what could happen next weekend?
Yeah, we have no idea.
Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe we'll get the head coach on the show. We'll see. No guarantees.
That's true.
But we'll have to pull those strings. So we'll be back next Thursday. We'll see if we can negotiate to get Swanson back.
We'll try.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It might be really hard to get him back. Depends on how good he does there.
Yeah. Some sort of swap.
Yeah, what would we have to say?
Maybe we just stay away from that.
We'll save that.
Yeah.
We'll save that for another day. Okay, that's going to do it for us. For Aric DiLalla, I'm Phil Milani. You've been listening to
The Neutral Zone.